Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Hands-On CISO podcast. My name is Adi, and today we're talking to Todd Fitzgerald. Todd is an experienced CISO and the #1 best-selling cybersecurity and privacy leadership author, with 5 cybersecurity books published. He's also a leading podcaster, leading CISO Stories podcast, which has almost 200 episodes. Todd, how are you doing today?
Great. It's great to be here today, Adi.
Amazing. So before anything else, you've come a very long way in cybersecurity, but how did you get started?
Well, it's interesting. So the first half of my career, I was really I started out as a computer programmer, but then quickly moved into database administration and data modeling. And so then I was managing DBAs and data modelers. And I did that first half of my career, and then there was a job that I was applying for that they said, well, do you know anything about security? Because I would be managing DBAs, security, and business intelligence. And I said, well, I know some things about security through working with DBAs and so forth. And I had a couple teams. I had the security team, I had the DBAs, and the business intelligence team. And my security team wasn't real happy that I was being hired, because they said, well, oh, he's a DBA. He's going to spend all his time with the DBA people. And what actually happened was I was very interested in security, and that's where I really started to grow my security skills. And I spent all my time with the security team because I really didn't need to spend a lot of time with the DBAs. And so then I never looked back. And that was many, many years ago.
Wow. So they were concerned that you're not going to pay attention to them, and you ended up paying attention only to them.
Yeah. Well, mostly them. Yeah.
Crazy. And when you started, what did your day-to-day look like as a manager in security and also DBA?
It's so when you have when you're managing these things. Now, this was a different time than it is now, and we have to take ourselves back that the security role was really a technical oriented role in organizations, and it was seen as giving access and authorization to files and things like that, and it's grown much larger than it is today. So it was like early days of security. And so you're dealing with a lot of different issues. You're dealing with, end users, problems with, access to systems, who needs what. But you're pretty much at that level. But we've really evolved, well beyond that, to where it's a much bigger scope of a problem. And I wrote the first book for ISC Squared called CISO Leadership Skills, Essential Leadership. And that was, the first attempt really to put some structure around, what is this job? But I didn't write that until 2008. Started that in 2006. So that was a few years later, based on some of those earlier experiences. And then now, I know we'll probably get into the book stuff later, but the CISO Compass book, which became the best-selling book each of the last 5 years, is a guidebook for CISOs. It was a complete rewrite. It wasn't just take the old book, update it a little bit. It was a throw away that book, rewrite this book, and it's actually twice the size of the prior book. So that's how much this field has really changed and grown.
Wow. What do you think about the book made it so relatable or so appealing to CISOs? Like, what was the thing they were so interested in?
So what I wanted to do with that is make something that was a structured way of looking at this role. So innovation is taking two different things that and putting it together. So if you think about it, think of the iPhone, for example. Apple didn't invent the telephone, they didn't invent the camera, and they didn't invent music, portable music. We had all those things. We had Walkmans, with cassette tapes, and then with CDs. But what they did was they took existing concepts and brought them together into something that was very usable. So now we have it in our pocket, right? We can have our music, we can have our videos, we have apps and everything else. And sometimes we can even use a phone to make a phone call today, right? So we've combined all those things. Well, I wanted to do something similar to this job of the CISO, and so I took something called the McKinsey 7S model, which is about innovation, or is about organizational effectiveness. And what they said was, there's 7 things that you need to make a strategy come true in an organization. It's structure, systems, style, staff, skills, and shared values. And every one of those things is important to achieve your business objective. So I thought, well, we have all these activities that we do in security. Why don't we tie these things together? Because we're really operating as a business within a business. Don't we want to be successful? Don't we want to achieve our strategy? So for example, if you don't have the right systems in place, and by that I mean the processes and routines that we do in an organization, they may be IT systems, but they're also the processes. If you don't have those in place to support your strategy, then you're not going to achieve your cybersecurity strategy. Or if you don't have the right skills in your organization, you could have a very nice strategy on paper, but you're not going to achieve it because you don't have the right people to do it. And so it's bringing all those things together. So that's what I structured the whole book around. What are all those things that you need to do? And then in addition to that, I invited 75 other top CISOs and industry leaders to take a problem and say, what was the problem? What did you do about it? What would you do differently? What was the result of what you did? So that other people can learn from your experience. So where you may not be, in a conversation with the global CISO for TikTok or the CISO for Coca-Cola, I brought those people, or JP Morgan Chase. I mean, we had all those people in the book. I brought those people together, and they shared their individual experiences on different dimensions of security. And that's what has made the book so powerful. It's not just a collection of stories that, I've seen some books where people shove together a whole bunch of stories, but it's not integrated, right? It's just a collection of stories, right? Well, this is a very structured way of looking at it. And then recently, we released the Privacy Leader Compass, which is targeted around chief privacy officers. And CISOs can also benefit from that as well by understanding all the laws and so forth. So that's what I think. I guess I get very passionate about this because it's a way to help, the next generation of people. I'm not, in that job anymore. And somebody has to fill those shoes to make sure that we're protecting things for all of us.
Amazing. Have you, when you were talking to all these different CISOs from such different companies, did they seem to have similar issues, similar views, or was it really very different depending on sector and industry and everything?
Well, what's interesting is the number of different issues that that CISOs are dealing with. I mean, it's not like I had 10 CISOs opine on a particular singular issue. There are all kinds of different issues, and so you get all these different perspectives. And what I asked the CISOs to write about is something they were passionate about and a problem that they solved. And so, I got really good content from them. So some people were working on things, for example, in data science, uh, and automating their environments and using SOAR to automate many of the tasks that could be automated. Well, they shared that knowledge and how they went about that. Other people had issues with identity and access management, and what were some of those issues? Some people talked about how do I work with the board, and what sort of tips would you give when you're giving that board presentation? I've had some people that looked at risk, and some people that have written some of the risk management books that we use, weigh in and talk about their experiences. So they become different, and then you get differing opinions as well. I had one person, for example, was talking about budget. Right, everybody wants a lot of budget as a CISO. Well, he wrote a very interesting piece in there. What happens when you get too much budget? And that's not a problem a lot of people would think about. But and he articulated this scenario where he went before before the board and everybody, and he said, hey, I I need this much money over 3 years to fill our gaps. And to his surprise, they came back to him and said, we'll give you the money, but we want you to get it done in a year. And he said it was a big mistake. Because even though he could get the security products and everything in, the organization couldn't change fast enough, couldn't adapt to all these new processes and ways of doing things. And so, that was a great lesson. Like, if you're going to do this kind of thing, well, maybe you don't accept that burden of all those activities in a 1-year time, because the organization can only handle so much change. So there were lots of those kinds of perspectives in there, and that's what I love about talking to CISOs, because you get experienced CISOs. We can all learn from them.
Wow, that story sounds like, as a CISO, a lot of the time you're between, on the one hand, you have your own feel, like you have to make sure security is happening the way it should. And on the other hand, you have management that has more business oriented goals. And then you have the people to educate and manage. How does everything merge together?
Very difficultly. That's not even a word, but I just we'll use that word. It's and that's why the CISO role is such a critical role today, because the CISO is really that business translator, and the successful ones are really good at that, because you're working with your upper management, and so you're understanding what the organizational business goals are. You understand enough about the technology to know what the technology can do for you. And then you've got to manage your teams and your people to make sure that you've got the right skills on your team to implement those things and move it forward. And then once you've done that, you have to educate your workforce so that they're actually working within that security system, and not trying to go around that. And so it really takes I really love your question, because it really takes all of those perspectives when you're looking at security. And I think it's let's face it, a lot of the security people come up through the technical ranks. And so things tend to be a little black and white down at the hardware level, right, and the software level. If you don't do something right, it doesn't work, right? And so we get into this mindset that this is the way it has to be. But people are people, and people don't work consistently. They don't follow the rules. They make up their own rules. Some people follow rules, some don't follow rules. So you have to have a system that takes all that into account.
If you've seen a shift in the way CISOs look at the human factor throughout the years.
I think, if we look at things like phishing campaigns, for example, I think that is one of the best things that could have arrived for CISOs, is the ability to do phishing campaigns. I know people have different views of those. But for me, I use those to draw attention to the fact that you may not be as knowledgeable as you think you are, talking about the end user, around security. And so if I've failed on a phishing test, or I've been duped, as some people might call it, then now all of a sudden I'm like, well, wait a minute, I missed something. Maybe I need to pay more attention to this. And now I'm open to learning. And I think that's what that really does for us, where it gives us the opportunity to then say, okay, let's talk about other things. Let's talk about, let's use that as the launch point to talk about, mobile security, and talk about your home security, and talk about updating your PCs, and, talking about use of, public Wi-Fi. And so we can use that as a springboard to talk about lots of other issues. And that's, I've always been a big proponent of security awareness. I used to do a lot of presentations, and one time they called me I was written in a computer magazine. They called me the prop comic, because I always use props, costumes, because I wanted a visual way to make the point. I've dressed up as Darth Vader and come into the room and talked about the 10 ways why Darth Vader was a great security manager, which is actually off of another piece that somebody wrote around project management a while ago. But I thought, well, that will be fun. And so you do all those things. Or if you have a breach, and I go out into the audience, and I'll have a megaphone, and I will go up into people's, right into their face and say, we got this breach, what are we going to do about it? What's your next step? And they're like, well, I don't know. And then I go to different people, but that's the reality of it. That's, and people remember those things. So in your organizations, we have to make security awareness memorable. So have it be entertaining, have it be funny, but make sure there's a message in there. Otherwise, you can't just have a clown show. But you need to have a message that comes through there.
How can you create a culture of people who are security aware if the company is currently not, versus if you're starting from scratch, you're very early in a company?
I think you have to articulate what the risks are, and not through fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but actually using real incidents that apply to your industry is a really good way to do that. And show that these things happen to people. Show how people get scammed. Talk to people about how their own bank account information can be missing one day if they're not if they're clicking on the wrong things on their phone, or they're going to some dodgy website, or they're ordering something online that you know they really don't know who this provider is. um, have it be personal to them, because people, let's face it, people want to know, and executives are this way too. You've got to answer the question, what's in it for me? You can't go to your marketing executive, your finance executive, and talk to them about security and why they need to fund this or they need to support you in this. You need to reverse that conversation and say, what is it? Why how can I help my chief marketing officer? How can I help my finance guy? What's in it for him? Okay, well, maybe the finance guy needs to be able to rely on his financial records in order to make the right financial reports, right? Well, maybe you sell integrity to your CFO. Maybe that's the trigger for him, that he's able to rely on that information he's actually reviewing, and he can trust those numbers that they haven't been changed, and that there isn't fraud in the system. So you have to look for ways to do that.
Interesting. Without mentioning any specific companies, of course, have you ever been in a company where a very bad security incident happened?
Yeah, I can tell you, we had one organization. Well, there's been many incidents, but just this one particular time, it just sticks in my memory because I think it was earlier in my career, and I was a CISO of an organization, and we were doing a lot of government contracting. And we had to have things like system security plans and risk assessments and policies and procedures and all that documented and reviewed by the government. And the auditors would come in. Well, we had about 80 audit findings, and some of those were high risk. And I'm looking at my stuff and I'm saying, well, nothing's wrong with my risk assessments, my security plans, all the deliverables that I had to produce as the chief security officer were all good. All of those IT audit issues, those were in the CIO's area. That was his issue. Because he had all these infrastructure problems and, identity management stuff and, all that stuff that he was supposed to fix. Well, then we were pulled in, the CIO and I were pulled into the president's office. And she looked at us and said, what's going on with these 80 audit findings? And then we had a discussion, and I said, well, they're all in the IT area or whatever. And she looked at me, and she looked at the two of us, and she says, I don't care whose issue this is. Both of you right now, this was mid-year, she says, both of you are getting a below average performance review if these aren't fixed by the end of the year. And so we walked out of that room, and it was an important lesson for me that we had to partner together to make these things go away, or it wasn't going to be good for either of us. And so that's when I learned the CISO can't really separate themselves from the issues in the organization. And luckily, by the end of the year, we had resolved those audit issues. We spent a lot of money, a lot of time, got a lot of resources. In fact, the CIO made a mention to me once. He says, Todd, everybody's working for you now, not me, because they're all doing security work. So we made it happen, and we both got above average reviews by the end of the year. But the president really did a really good thing for us and said that you guys have to work together and figure it out. And that was a very important lesson for me um, to learn, and that about the role of the CISO, and that you have to partner with these other people in the organization.
It sounds like in the CISO role, the thing that keeps coming up is the amount of responsibility that you have, both for the things you know about and the things you don't know about, which can create a lot of stress. Have you seen any? What was your way of dealing with that stress? And have you seen any CISOs doing any other interesting things to do that?
I think, one of my hobbies, really a kind of a side hobby, if you look at half of the books behind me are leadership books. They're personality profile type books, like the Myers-Briggs, the DISC profiles, the Enneagrams, the different team assessment tools. And I find that I'm a very calm person. Uh, that's my personality, I guess. And I remember I was on one call, and there was an auditor that was making a point from a major big four auditing firm. They're supposed to audit in a sample when they look at if you're looking at identity and identity and access management. They were looking at the separation of duties issue, right? And they looked at 100,000 of our requests that had gone through the identity and access management period in this one period, and they found 4 situations where there was a separation of duties issue, and they were going to write up a finding. And everybody else on the call is listening, and I'm going toe to toe with the auditor, saying, "This is crazy." I said, the team should be getting an award, not a finding, for only having 4. And I had one person afterwards saying, "I don't know how you didn't just jump through the." She said, "I was ready to jump through the phone and strangle the auditor, for even going after that, but you just calmly dealt with it." And I think we have different personalities in dealing with those issues. I've done a few podcasts in the CISO Stories podcast with people. We've talked about stress and different views and wellness. And some of them have led some very large companies, and people have different views on. Some people say, it's not that bad, and some people say we have the most stressful job of any of the executives. I'm not in that camp that says that we have the most stressful job. I think they're all stressful. Once you get to an executive role, you have a stressful job. If you're the CFO, the chief marketing officer, the chief operations officer, you have to look at the CISO role as being on that level. And maybe it's not there yet in your organization, but at some point it will be. But that's what you're handling. And the big driver of that is you have a lot of unknowns. You don't know walking into work one day if that's going to be a really, really bad day or a really, really good day.
What do you think is the biggest challenge in the security field right now?
Biggest challenge, I think, I think, one thing that's underestimated a lot is just the external suppliers that companies are dealing with, and how are we managing all those vendor relationships. I think CISOs are very good at looking at their own programs, but looking at those connections and how they interact with your company, and how can you possibly know the security posture of every one of those organizations that are your touch points. it's almost an impossible job, but it's one that has to be done, and I think that's the biggest challenge. I know there's a lot of talk today about AI. Um, I think AI holds a lot of promise. I use AI. I think it can be a great time saver, but there's also a big risk there too. Uh, uh, so I think a lot of people are trying to get their arms around AI today, but we can't forget that if we just go back 2 years, a few people were talking about AI, but we had a whole industry that was talking about security. So those problems did not go away. um, so every solution can't just be the AI solution or how do we handle AI. It gets back to what are all those other things that we're supposed to be doing.
Do you see AI as an issue primarily, or how do you view it? Because I've seen a lot of CISOs that are not that concerned about AI, and some CISOs who are absolutely sure that it will be like the absolute game changer of completely new attacks, different ways to do things, while others don't really seem to like don't really care about it that much.
I think the reality is AI has actually been built into a lot of our systems for several years now. It's just that ChatGPT brought it to the consumer forefront, right? And in fact, in the CISO Compass book, I have a chapter devoted to emerging technologies and trends. That's one of the things that informs a strategy. And the piece that's important about in emerging technologies and trends is they work both sides of that coin. They're both a threat and they're a tool. So we have to look at them both ways. We should be adopting those technologies to where they benefit us, where they can save time, where they can help minimize workloads, and make ourselves better. But we also have to look at, okay, if those are being used against us, how do we counteract that? If the attacks are getting richer, for example, the phishing attacks that could be tailored more to my personality and where I shop and what I do, and tailor those messages better. You can guarantee yourselves that the well-funded nation states, organized crime, so forth, are using these tools, trying to figure out how to use these tools. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we have fundamentals that we're not doing very well today. Take vulnerabilities, for example. How many vulnerabilities or if I went into any organization today and said, show me your list of vulnerabilities that you haven't patched for yet, I'd get a pretty big list. So, but we're worried about AI. We don't need AI to get into your system. So, we have to put it in the right context. So right now it's the hype. Eventually, if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, it'll fall down into the trough of disillusionment, and it'll move into a plateau of productivity where we figured out where AI fits and where it doesn't fit, and how it can best be used.
How do you keep updated in a field that's changing so quickly? Like everything, every week you have a new breach and you find out, oh, maybe that's also a vulnerability that we have that I didn't think about, or maybe some new technology comes out, or like a lot of things are happening at the same time. and you have all the regular things that you already have to do. So how do you make sure that you're actually up to date, that your team is up to date, that people know what is happening in the world? And do you even care?
Well, so I've so for the last 5 years, I've contracted to the Cyber Risk Alliance, and which is the organization within it called the Cyber Risk Collaborative, as their VP is cybersecurity strategy. And one of the things that we produce out of that is a daily morning security report, which takes all the news feeds and condenses it down into 7 or 8 stories that are top of mind, so that CISOs can go in there, look, see where are the top stories, and react to those. I usually take those and I post one on LinkedIn and give my own commentary on it. So there's that. Like, you're activating a muscle every day, right? You're keeping up with that. LinkedIn, I think, is also just a great resource. It's to me, it's more. I mean, there's a lot on LinkedIn these days. Quite honestly, that's like a lot of promotion of this event, or I spoke at that event or that event. Okay, that's out there. That's fine. But there's also stories that people are publishing out there, and news relevant items that I think are worthwhile to take a look at. So I think looking at social media, whatever platform it is, if it's Twitter or LinkedIn or wherever people get their news information, just listening to the evening news, you're gonna find out those things. Although there's usually other sources that have that before then. Um, but I think you have to stay in tune with what's going on to really be effective today, to really be in that conversation. The other thing I would say too is people have to network, and I know that's a struggle for some people, especially people who are very introverted, to get out, to go to those industry events like ISSA or ISACA or the IEPP, that whatever professional organizations are in your area, you've got to go to those meetings and learn from other people and network with other people. And it's not, people, I think, make the mistake with networking, and they start networking when they've lost their job. And that is the wrong time to start building a network. People should be out there. I'm going to dinners with CISOs all the time, and events, and where we talk about issues. And that's what you need to do. Once you drop out of that, then it's going to be difficult, because you're not going to know what was that. What's that breach? What's this SolarWinds breach thing? I don't know what that is. You're going to be a little disconnected, right? If you're not up on those things.
Interesting. How would you say people who are just starting to be CISOs? Because I've talked to CISOs who said they would like to be more connected in that group, and they know that there are things of the sort of what you said, where CISOs meet and talk, network, and they're not sure how to sort of get in the room. What would you recommend?
So what I would recommend, and what I see being more effective, is when there are, there's different types of dinners. There's different types of events. There's some that are just CISO oriented. People are currently CISOs or who have been CISOs, and then there's ones that are I'd say like ISSA is much more of a broader audience. It's more technical, but you're going to have some CISOs there. Having those relationships, and having that relationship with your own CISO within your own organization, and ask them to be brought along to one of those events, to get exposed to other people. And because I've seen people do that, bring their own leaders, and I think we should be encouraging that. Uh, uh, to get into that. And then even if it's not like a CISO event, go to a security event, because there's going to be other CISOs there. And that's how you start to make those relationships. And then, at some point there's going to be some invite to some event that somebody's going to bring you along. But that will never happen if you're at home and you're working remotely all the time and you're not going to any of the social events, and you don't see those as important, or see them as a waste of time. That is completely wrong. Most jobs are actually achieved through networks, and not through some posting on a job board, LinkedIn. Most of those things are filled through personal networks. Because why do you think that is? Well, the reason is it's all about risk, right? And CISOs are risk averse by nature. I think we're a risk averse group. Well, you want to reduce your risk of making a bad hire. If I get to know you in some other setting, I may not know your work, but I know what kind of a person you are, and I think you're probably, we've had some conversations. I can see you got some kind of intelligence, and you have a strong work ethic. You've now lowered my risk to be hired versus a resume coming in that I have no idea who you are.
Very interesting. I would say that is relevant probably to all industries. Like the fact that if you want people to recommend you, or you want to get more opportunities, people need to trust you, which is interesting. Okay, so do you have time for 2 final questions?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, what do you think the field is going to look like in a few years? What is going to be different?
I think it's I hate to say it's evolving. I actually wrote the first chapter in the CISO Compass book is I've dedicated it to the CISO evolution, because I think that people need to learn history. How did we get to, why is this role what it is today? And I go through 5 phases. I've actually added a 6th phase now. And dividing up the years of how we've moved from this technical, through to risk, through to the cloud and socially mobile, and into the privacy aware CISO. And now we're into this business resilient supply chain CISO. And each of these phases adds new skills that are required to be able to function. And I think more and more the CISO is being depended on to secure their organization and to reduce the risk of what happens when there is a cyber attack against your company, and planning for when it does happen. How well equipped are you to deal with that? Is it going to shut down your business? We've seen many examples where it has shut down the business. If we look at when WannaCry and NotPetya came out a few years ago, the shipping company Maersk was shut down for 3 weeks. They couldn't. You've got containers on ships with whatever's in there not moving anywhere. The cost was enormous. And then we have, there's a whole bunch of other examples of that. And, we've had recent examples of, cyber events, one with a major security company, not too long ago, that had an error in change control that impacted people in a very personal way. Flights weren't getting out, systems weren't coming up, and so forth. So I think the world is starting to see the importance of this role. And this is just going to be a staple in organizations, but it's really about managing risk and how do we limit the damage? How do we make sure we've got the right investment in the company? And that's an art. And so that's where we're really going is to that person has to be the one that is not making all the decisions related to that, but is really more of the orchestra leader and making sure that the organization says, oh, we want our risk to be this much, then we have to spend this much, or we're going to be out of sync. And so the CISO is the one who's making that balance work.
Balancing everything at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, I told you I use props in my presentations. I'm probably going to bring this one out again. I had one I was doing around all the different compliance requirements once, and I had spinning plates. Remember the old spinning plates on a pole? And I learned how, and I learned how to spin like 6 plates at the same time. To do that, I may have to bring that one back up again, but that's exactly how it feels like as a CISO.
Wow, I'm sure I can see how you got to where you got as a CISO when I look at all the things that just making it super interesting. And I feel like you can also feel it in this conversation, like everything you say, you have an example, you have a story. So everything feels very engaging, and you can really understand, everyone can really understand hopefully what you mean when you talk about different scenarios in the security sense, but also in the more simple, like this example, for example.
Thank you.
Okay, so one final question. Thank you so much for this entire talk. This has been super interesting. What advice do you have to anyone who's either thinking about getting into security or is already a security professional, but is looking at and interested in becoming a CISO one day?
Well, just buy the CISO Compass book. That's all you have.
Link down below.
And there's a coupon in the back, and you mail in the coupon, and then you get your CISO job. It's that easy. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I guess that's what you have to do.
No, in seriousness, I would say a couple things. The one thing I've learned in my career is learn to be uncomfortable. Feel like you never know enough, and somebody always knows more. I felt that way my whole career. And what that does is it drives you to learn more. And it's a cliche that we should do continuous learning, but certifications, for example, I have a bunch of them, and I never tried to get all these letters after my name. That was never the goal. But for me, the certifications were a way to say, I want to really learn this. And if I have to take a test at the end of it that tests my knowledge, I'm going to actually study this and I'm actually going to learn this really, really well. And so I encourage people do that. And so each year I would get a different certification in something, that moves you forward. Do the networking piece. But having that sense of being uncomfortable, once you get good at something, and then there'll be something else, and it's like, I'm not quite sure how to do that, or that person does it really well. I wish I did it well like that. Well, that's okay, because that means that you're paying attention to something that you probably should learn. The other thing I say, and I've given a few presentations on this, it's one of my favorite topics actually, is, do you want to be a techie or a CISO? And my challenge is, by the end of that presentation, I ask people to make a decision. So sometimes we go our whole careers without making a choice. So do you want to go into management, or do you want to stay technical? And I would say from the outset, either path is fine if it makes you happy. So find out what do you really want to do? Because once you leave the technical path and go towards the CISO path, you will always maintain some level of technology proficiency, but you'll never be as good as the technical person who is stayed technical and does that every single day. And so you have to recognize that, and you're going to rely on them, and you're going to rely on those people to give you advice. And that's best for your team. And so that you can do what you do. I learned a long time ago, one of your jobs is a senior manager is to provide air cover to your team so that they can do what they want to do every day. So if you've got a firewall engineer and that's what they want to do every day, well, then you're actually working with the rest of management to say why you should get to do what you do every day and that you're doing it right. So those are just a few ideas, but make that decision. Be uncomfortable. That means that you're growing and you're learning new stuff.
Perfect. So where can people find the book and the podcast?
So the CISO Stories podcast, you can just Google CISO Stories podcast, and it'll come up. It's hosted by SC Magazine. The book, easily, the way most people get books today is on Amazon. It's called the CISO Compass book. The new book that we just came out with in 2024 is the Privacy Leader Compass. It uses the same structure and goes through all the privacy laws. And what I'm happy about that book is that we engaged top privacy experts, just like we did with the CISO Compass, from Microsoft to people in 15 different countries. We have the chief privacy officers. We also have regulators, data protection authorities, all on the privacy side of the house. And CISOs need to know about privacy too. So that's why they're very complementary books. But that one I co-authored with Dr. Valerie Lyons, who has her PhD in information privacy and is the COO of a privacy and consulting firm. So over in Dublin, Ireland. So. So you can get both of those on Amazon, and I just really enjoy being able to bring this knowledge, my experiences, but also the experiences and the stories from other CISOs and top leaders in the industry.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure.